Hello, Consolation. We're starting again. I'm trying to do this in a live YouTube video, and I'm going to post a link to it later on. But let me just reiterate what I said before, and I'm going to start again. I'm reading from this book, and this book is my love letter to fandom and to conventions. If you've ever been to a convention, and you all have, because otherwise you would not be here, you will recognize the people and the places in this book. If you've been to specific cons, you may even recognize specific hotels. This is a mashup of a hotel, but you'll recognize the individual corridors. And I'm sure you've met a lot of the people inside this book. Without further ado, let me just add what I said before in the other video. I'm willing to offer the first 10 people who message me or email me telling me I want one, a free ebook copy of Abducticon. And if you want to talk about signed copies later on, we can do that as well. But Amazon isn't shipping right now, so we'll have to wait a bit on that. Anyway, I'm starting again from the beginning. So in case you missed my previous attempt at live video, it kind of didn't work very well. It just got dropped by Facebook. So let's hope this one lasts. Anyway, starting again. Abducticon, Friday. Where are you? You should have been here an hour ago with that poster. Sorry, the printer screwed it up again. The first proof I saw somehow managed to make Brent Spiner look like Ben Spinner. They're redoing it. I should be on my way with the posters within 20 minutes. Sorry, Anime. Al Coe hunched over the counter of the print shop with his phone cradled between his ear and his shoulder, winced into the countertop even as the sorry left his lips. This was typical, apologizing to Andy Mae Wilkinson for things that people had no actual control over but somehow ended up assuming responsibility for. Skewered by Andy Mae's limpid blue eyes, combined with the buzzing chainsaw edge in her voice when she was riled, people would instinctively just shout, "Guilty," and fold. He at least should have known better, should have been immune to the syndrome. Having Andy Mae as an on-again, off-again girlfriend for almost 4 years now should have been against the weapons she wielded against lesser mortals. But it was Andy Mae, and she was a force of nature. Her voice, emerging from his cell phone, muffled and muted by flesh and fabric, did not even sound mollified at the apology. Next time I pick the printer. Why did you pick that incompetent idiot anyway? And didn't you tell them it was a rush job? They actually pushed back another job to accommodate us, Al said, trying to keep the peace, but then bit his lip as he realized that his statement wasn't an excuse in Andy Mae's book. Of course they would have pushed back anything else to make room for her own rush job. That was the way things worked in her world. It's getting done, honest. Should be back really soon. You'd better be. Our program booklets were printed a week ago, and Xander finds out now they give an entirely wrong time for the guest of honor interview. He's been hand-correcting that all morning in thousands of copies. Wait, how many registrations have you had? Well, hundreds anyway, although it looks like we're going to get anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 warm bodies in the end if all projections pan out. It's only been Xander and 2 minions, 3 people, hard at it, and they're still at it anyway. And everyone else is buzzing around like bees kicked out of a beehive. And nobody can make coffee, apparently. That or the hotel has some kind of brew that tastes like they use runoff water where they collected after the gamers have had their end-of-con showers. You couldn't pick up a package of decent coffee on your way back, could you? Just for us? Her voice had changed again into her southern belle wheedle, and Al never did have an adequate defense against that. Sure, he said. On my way. Almost done here. He looked up and caught the eye of a young man who was operating the printer from which his posters would soon be issuing forth. The operator gave him a grin and a cheerful thumbs up. The best Al could manage putting down his phone was a wan smile. Good God, it was only Friday morning. The con hadn't officially even started yet. Andy Mae thumbed off her own phone with an exasperated sigh. She'd been on some con-com or another as a minion or a lieutenant since she was a teen, but this was her first time in the chair, and she desperately wanted everything to go without a hitch. But there had been nothing but hitches all the way down the line. It was Friday morning, the 59th second of the 11th hour. The registration desk in the hotel foyer was seeing its first flurries of walk-in registrations of the day. Not quite the full frenzy yet, but it was starting to build, which meant that the convention had actually, at least semi-officially, begun. And yet there were 1,001 tasks that still required her attention, and all of them were things without which the con could not possibly run without a hiccup. Not for the first time she wondered uncharitably if her predecessor, Sam Dutton, the entrenched chair of this con for the last damn near 3 decades, had vindictively left some kind of evil spell on things after they had voted him out of the office at last during that con meeting straight after the previous year's convention. Sam was here now, somewhere in the hotel. Andy May hadn't seen him precisely, but she felt his presence in the corridors, enough to raise goose pimples on her skin when she bustled down the hallways or waited impatiently for tardy elevators. He was here, and he was watching, and he would gloat magnificently if he perceived any sign of weakness or failure. She could not fail, not in Sam's presence, not in his sight. This card had to be something they would still be talking about when she was an old lady and hailed in hotel corridors from the future as the patron saint of amazing. She wished, not for the first time, that she could have banned Sam from coming at all this year. Less pressure. But he was free to register for the con as a guest now that he was no longer a ConCom member, and there was nothing she could do about that. She scowled and wandered over to the nerve center of the operation, the con ops office. In the first room of the suite, as she entered, busy volunteers were stuffing envelopes with program booklets, name badges, party invitations, and other assorted ephemera. Some of them looked up as she came in and managed smiles or waves before returning to their task. Andy May passed through and into the back room, outfitted with the latest in technology, including feed from several webcams strategically placed around the hotel. Some of the designated panel rooms were still being cleared out in preparation for their role in the proceedings, and the cameras showed nothing more than an empty shell of a room with perhaps a uniformed hotel flunky carrying in loads of folding chairs for the audiences to come. Of the couple of hundred people who had already registered on Thursday night early reg and on Friday morning, a hardcore few had already found the paneled-off ballroom designated as the games room, and 1 or 3 games that were already in progress there under the camera's watchful eye. Another camera showed the computer game room with its eerily glowing banks of monitors, at least 3 of which were occupied by players whose eyes glittered with an air of something that could almost be menace in the dimly lit room, intent on the games on their screen. They couldn't plant their own cameras in the public areas because the hotel objected to this, and they weren't allowed access to the hotel's own security feeds. But in any case, nothing interesting was happening yet in the field of view of the only one they had up front, showing an awkward angle of the reg table, but not the rest of the foyer. "Any word from the airport?" Andy May called out into the tangle of computer cables and blinking screens and chattering printers. "Dave called. He said as best as he can tell the flight's been delayed." Libby Broadband, communications man, lifted her hands from the keyboard for a moment, looking up. "He said he'll keep us posted. I've had another dozen emails from people who are confused about the hotel." Andy May tried not to roll her eyes. "Really, anyone would think I'd changed the venue just to upset people," she said. "This is a better hotel for us. We've outgrown the old place. I'd outgrown it 5 years ago. If only Sam didn't have this sentimental attachment to that horrid fugly carpet they had in the foyer or something. Just tell them to get their asses over here and promise them bigger and better." "Did," Libby said. At least one of them emailed back, sounding less than convinced. "How many do you figure will actually turn up this year?" "All of them," Andy May said through gritted teeth, "if they know what's good for them. I run just as good a con as Sam ever did, better. I'm the best new thing in town." The gamers will," Libby said philosophically. "As long as they program the GPS to bring them to the correct address, it won't matter to them one way or another if they're stuck inside some mirrored ballroom at the old Marriott or here at the California resort. It's all the same room, really. Have you ever wondered if the gamers actually do live in an alternate reality and only the room moves, but they simply stay in it?" "Anything's possible," Andy May said acidly. She was just a touch sensitive to the gamer comments, having spent at least a year of her own life buried in just such a mirrored ballroom playing the games that had been the foundation of her existence. That was before she had discovered that real-life games could be far more amusing than the fantasy role-playing, like running cons, for instance. Like running this con, specifically. Finally, her chance to shine at the thing she wanted so very badly to be good at. There were definitely enough moments of the hard reality of it all. However, she caught herself wishing that the whole thing had been a game interface. She knew how to toggle those to suit her purposes when it mattered. Reality meant she had to deal with other people, and those were usually variables she could not predict accurately enough to produce a flawless result. It was the little things that kept tripping her up. Little things like her hotel liaison stuck at the airport waiting for her writer guest of honor, Vincent J. Silverman, hurriedly recruited at more or less the last moment when the original writer, Goch, the big-name author who was supposed to be her draw card, had decided to cancel on her. At least Vincent J. Silverman wrote stuff that was remotely related to the con's theme, which was a blessing. Andy May had dispatched David Lorne, her hotel and guest liaison, to meet Silverman's flight, but he hadn't been on it, and then emailed that he would be taking a later flight. Now Dave had been cooling his heels at the airport for the better part of the morning, and she had better things for him to do than hang around the arrivals gate all day. She was starting to get just a titch annoyed at her author guest. She tapped at her left ear, the one with the earpiece via which the committee stayed in touch with each other, No old-fashioned handheld radios for her and her crew, not like Sam's antiques. Again. She wished people would just check in so that she knew where everyone was and what they were doing. Everything under control downstairs, she asked, leaning over Libby's shoulder and peering at the registration table camera feed. The screen showed a grainy image of one lanky-haired young man handing over a sheaf of crumpled bills with a hint of someone else waiting patiently in line just behind. So far, so good, Libby said. It's just Felicity down there for the moment, though. Maybe we could send a couple more volunteers down to man the desk in about an hour, but we seem to be in a lull and everything's pretty quiet. She says she can cope with things right now. Any update on... She says there have been 30 more registrations in the past hour, Libby said, preempting the question. But they said their friends would be coming, apparently, after work. Give them a few more hours. Andy May drummed her fingers in the back of Libby's chair. The posters needed to be up by then, damn it. The posters with their starter and attractions. The posters which might have moved more registrations. The posters that were still in the printers, with Al. I wish I could clone myself, Andy May murmured under her breath. It was necessary for her to oversee everything, or else nothing would turn out right, but being everywhere at once was proving to be rather wearying on her body. She found herself wishing that Al was back already, and not for the reasons that were foremost in her mind just a moment before. She desperately wanted a cup of good coffee. You sure this is the right place? Angel Silverman said doubtfully as the yellow cab pulled up from under the shining canopy of the fake mother-of-pearl portico arching above the entrance to the California resort. That's the address, Vince Silverman said, fishing in his pocket for his wallet. Here, keep the change, he said to the driver, handing over a $50 bill. The driver took the money with a delicate two-finger grip. Much obliged, he said. Let me get your bags. Angel had already got out of the car and had taken a few steps off to her right where the driveway ended at a sturdy stainless steel fence wreathed with flowering creeper. At least it had a nice view, she called back over her shoulder. Maybe we'll rate a room with one, Vince said. Come on, let's get checked in and then you can go exploring. There's a pool, Angel said, pointing. Swell, Vince muttered. Hey, later, Angel. Come on. Angel left her vantage point with reluctance and shouldered one of the smaller bags piled by the entrance. Okay, hon, she said. Right behind you. I suppose I'd better find someone from the committee first, Vince said, tackling the revolving doors with the finesse of someone who was no stranger to handling such things with a double armful of luggage. An expressionless man with too perfect silvery white skin, just a little too tightly stretched over the bones of his face, watched them enter, standing without moving, only a few steps away, as the Silvermans fell into the foyer with their baggage. Vince looked up, rearranging his grip on his rolling carry-on, and gave the other man a once-over. Con-goer, definitely. One learned to recognize them on sight after enough conventions. Just enough of a too-weird vibe to be a mundane. I don't suppose you know where the reg desk is? He asked conversationally. The man lifted one hand and pointed off to the right. Ah, okay, thanks. There was indeed a U-shaped barricade of generic hotel tables, complete with white tablecloths and starched white ruffled skirts, velcroed on and already coming off at the corners. It was arranged in one corner of the foyer with an array of computer screens and a tangle of black lanyards in evidence next to one workstation. Another nest of tables had a large orange and green sign that proclaimed T-shirts, although as yet the advertised merchandise hadn't manifested. The registration tables were currently manned by a solitary girl whose long hair, which might have originally have been a mousy light brown, but was now dyed in multicolored streaks of improbable hues, was draped over a black leather corset. She slouched in her chair behind one of the computers, seemingly totally engrossed in a manga. Stay here, Vince said to Angel. The hotel desk is in the opposite direction. I'll see if I can get someone in charge, and then we can't go check in. No point in dragging all this luggage both ways. Angel nodded, and Vince shrugged off his own shoulder duffel bag to add to the pile at her feet, and thus unencumbered strode off towards the computer bank. The girl behind the table showed no awareness of his approach, nor indeed of his presence, as he came to a halt in front of her and waited politely for a few moments. Then he cleared his throat, and she looked up, languid, her eyes almost manga big in her narrow, pale face. You want to register? She asked, putting the manga down with evident reluctance. I'm Vincent Silverman, Vince said, and then, when she simply stared at him without any apparent recognition, added gently, Your guest of honor? The girl shot up in her seat, her spine straight, appeared to think about getting up, opened and closed her mouth for a few times, and then said desperately, Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that I'll just call somebody. You do that, Vince said, giving her a calming smile. She fumbled with a small microphone that let off a bud inside her left ear and gabbled into it, almost as incoherent as she had been with Vince himself. listened briefly, and then looked up with evident relief. Andy May's on her way down, she said. The chair. Thank you, Min said. She'll have your badge, the girl babbled. I'm so sorry, Mr. Silverman. She might have been a generation too young to understand the basis for any of his books. Vince, never as conscious of his graying hair as he was in that moment, found himself torn between wishing that he had that innocent back, the anonymity of his younger days that made it almost certain that nobody at all could be expected to recognize him on sight, and a strange kind of annoyed resentment that, after all the years he had put into this job, into his reputation, meant absolutely nothing at all, and the younger generation of fans, the one who followed his own cohort, had no reason to know who he was. But he could see someone almost running down the foyer now, a delicate blonde girl who looked almost entirely too fragile to bear the load of a con chair, but whose badge, with its long tail of colorful ribbons attached to it, branded her such. She sailed right past Angel and the bags, and came to a skidding halt at his side, flushed and out of breath. I sent Dave to get you at the airport, she said by way of greeting. How did you get here? He just phoned upstairs that he was still waiting for... Oh dear, I'm sorry if I managed to miss the connection, Vin said. We took a cab. She turned briefly to follow the direction, and she nodded when he said we, and appeared to have only just become aware of Angel's presence. My wife, Wynne said helpfully. Might we get checked in and dump the bags? Angel saw a pool earlier. Yes, of course. I'm Andy May. We emailed. Pleasure, Vince said. This way, Andy May said, motioning for him to follow. Your room's ready. Would you just excuse me? He nodded and started walking towards the hotel desk, stopping only to collect Angel and the bags on the way, and Andy May turned to the still flustered and round-eyed girl behind the desk. Get Libby to phone Dave and tell him to get back here, she snapped. I don't know how he managed it, but he let our guest of honor sail straight past him and now got a cab fare to reimburse on top of all else. And how could you possibly have embarrassed us like that by not knowing who he was? Yes, I'll sort it out, the girl babbled. By the way, how many registrations so far? Andy May said, changing direction with such speed and agility that the other girl could only open and close her mouth several times in response, like a guppy out of its fishbowl, and then offer quietly and very lamely that she wasn't sure at all, but she thought there had been more than 50 people who had registered in her own shift so far. It's okay, but hopefully it'll pick up, Andy May muttered. She glanced at the pile of pocket programs stacked on the table by the computers and lifted one up, flipping through it with a quick, nervous motion. Have all these been corrected? Call Xander if he needs to fix the wrong time. And then she turned, realized that her VIP was almost at the hotel desk, dropped the program back on its pile, and strode up after the Silvermans in a flurry of swirling skirts, leaving her volunteer feeling as though she had just been wrung out like a wet dishcloth and by someone who knew how. The expressionless man by the door had not moved and had watched the entire exchange with a sort of dispassionate curiosity. It's after 4. What's the foyer looking like? Healthier, Libby said, walking into the room where Andy May was facing. I've just been down there. There's a doubled-back queue from the reg desk all the way to the hotel desk, and I'm starting to see the regulars out there. Chicken Man is back. I've seen him all over the place in that weird cluck onesie of his. Bless him for classing up the joint. How does he ever go to the bathroom in a hurry? TMI, someone said from the back of the room, and the ripple of laughter spread out into the volunteers. This year, the hair color of choice seems to be bright purple or neon green, Libby said, continuing her report. But I've seen a couple of oranges and a handful of bright pinks and 1 or 2 lemon yellow mohawks. I think there's a posse of them out there. Is there a new manga or something? Anyway, as for the classics, there's 3 layers so far, 1 original edition and 2 slave girls, about par for a course. And one guy who thinks he might be Chewbacca, but if you ask me, I think Bigfoot's mom slipped up and let him off the leash and out on his own. There's one girl who really is not wearing nearly enough to even be classed as a costume, said Xander Washington, programming chair, who had himself been roaming the halls only a half hour previous. If you were to put together everything she's got on in a single piece of material, you wouldn't have enough to make a barstool covering. Is that the same girl who tried to convince me that Saran wrap was a costume last year? Asked Simon Ballard, head of security, in his full Viking regalia, an anachronistic earbud glowing blue in his left ear. She had the unmitigated gall to tell me, when every other logical thing to try had failed her, that it was a statement on existentialism. One of your postgraduate buddy bunnies letting it all hang out? Xander teased, grinning. Honestly, that's healthier than the zombie crowd, Libby said, and then, as 1 or 2 of the others lifted their heads at the comments, added, Sorry, but they freak me out. Why would any living thing dressed up as something half-rotten and think that is attractive? You're more into vampires, Xander said, lifting his arms up into a bad imitation of throwing out a cloak and maybe a set of bat wings. Just as dead, you know. But way more interesting, Libby retorted. Hi, can I help you? Carol Elliott, said a woman who had just walked into the green room before, where the Concom had congregated. You have my badge up here? Somewhere, Libby said. Elliott E. It'll be in this box. She rummaged around through a pile of manila envelopes and pulled one out with a triumphant flourish. There we are. Your itinerary is inside. We printed them on the back of the name tents this year. Oh, good. It's always great to know where you're supposed to be next, Carol said, opening her envelope and riffling through it. And my husband's badge? Eep. They might have that downstairs, but you don't want to go down to that zoo. Let me call them and double check. In the meantime, you can get Mike over there to just print out a temp one, and that'll be fine until we sort it out. Okay, thanks. Do you have mine there while you're at it? Another pro wearing a pith helmet crowned by a pair of truly spectacular steampunk goggles pushed forward past Carol Elliott's retreating back. I'm Bob Williamson. Libby reached for a different stack of envelopes. Let me see. She had almost a dozen of them turn up in quick succession, pros who were at the convention to work, writers who were on panels, artists from the art show, one of the musicians who were to give a concert later that weekend. They needed their badges, they needed information, they needed supplies and minions for set-up work that needed to be done. They often just needed coffee. Libby had her head down and was waist-high in manila envelopes when she lifted her head and smiled at the next person standing in front of her. Name? Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean to intrude if you're busy, the young man said apologetically. It was only then that she noticed the shiny brass badge on the lapel of her waistcoat that was entirely unlike anything that a con-goer would be seen in. She squinted at the badge, and he offered up a preemptive hand. I'm Luke Barnes. I'm the night manager, just come on duty. Actually, it's my first time on the hot seat tonight. Just wandered in to see if you guys were okay out here, if you had everything you needed. How sweet, Libby said, and meant it literally. In general, they were not much given to receiving visits from the managerial staff up in the green room at con-ops. Maybe it was just at the first time in the hot seat thing. The boy, and he didn't look much older than someone who could legitimately still be called a boy, was so very new at this, earnest and eager to please. I think we're fine, really. Good. It's my first time in something this big. I don't think this hotel has had this many people. I'm perfectly certain we're this close to breaking the fire codes. He sounded a little nervous, and Libby gave him a wide and encouraging smile. You'll be fine. I know it must all look weird, but... Oh, no, I love sci-fi, Luke said. Xander, who had just come into the room, gave a theatrical eye roll at this, but Luke failed to notice. Ever been to a con? Libby asked. Well, this one, Luke said, grinning. Let me know if you guys need anything. Will do, Libby said. There was something that she might have asked for, but she couldn't remember it right there and then, and Luke ducked his head at her, gave everyone else a cheery wave, and wriggled out of the increasingly crowded room. Sci-fi, muttered Xander scornfully. Everyone has to start somewhere, Rat, Libby said, using the nickname that she was far better known by in that crowd. In its entirety, Lab Rat, often shortened to just Rat. You were a con virgin once, too. Yeah, but I was 15, Xander said, crossing his eyes. And look at me now. Hey, is there any more coffee in that pot? Coffee. Libby remembered that she'd overheard Andy May complaining about coffee, asking Al to bring some decent coffee when he came back with the posters and which announced their star attraction. Andy May had scored the coup of getting two of the most famous androids of the genre, Data from Star Trek and the Terminator, to make a brief but very expensive, this one item had eaten a lion's share of the budget for that year, appearance at the con with its theme of robots and androids. How Andy May had managed to even find a way to get in touch with someone like actor-turned-politician Arnold Schwarzenegger was beyond Libby's comprehension. She herself wouldn't have known where to start, but Andy May had been determined to make this first con she chaired something that would not be forgotten in a hurry. Somehow, through methods that might have involved the midnight summoning of demons, she had done it. And the two actors portraying the android character, Brent Spiner and Arnold Schwarzenegger, were due to show up for a photo op in a brief signing spot and fan meet and greet on Saturday afternoon, one of the crowning selling points of this con. The demon hypothesis might not have been so far-fetched because once the coup was secured, everything else seemed to go haywire. Libby, as a designated media and communications member of the Concom, had been handed the publicity baton, and she had done fairly well in publicizing the presence of the two actors on outside media. Inside the con itself, however, things were a different matter. That was why Alco was at the printers for the third time, for the final and correct version of the posters they had ordered for the con. He should have been back with those posters by now. The posters and the coffee. To the best of Libby's knowledge, and it would have been her business to know, the posters had not materialized, and neither had the good coffee. Andy May would have had a loud word to say on that if it had arrived, whether or not it had matched her own august criteria in the end. No coffee, no posters, no Al. And it was now getting on for Friday evening, and the queue of registrants had grown long, and a bunch of games had already started in the designated ballroom, with 3 tables surrounded by players throwing dice and blissfully divorced for the duration from anything resembling reality. The first scattered parties would be starting in a matter of hours. The con, to all intents purposes, had begun, and Libby was woefully bereft in any material larger than an A4 sheet hastily printed on a local color printer, cobbled together by Libby herself to be inserted at the last moment into the glossy full-color souvenir program books, letting those who had just been handed the booklets at the registration desk know that the famous androids would be coming. But even those only announced their presence. It was the big posters to be plastered all over the hotel which were to announce the final date and time. "Anyone seen Al?" Libby called out into the chaos of the green room. "Not since this morning," Xander said, chewing on a messy sandwich thrown together from the cold meats and cheese platter that had been provided for the green room volunteers' sustenance. "I think we should," Libby began, but then several earpieces squawked simultaneously, with people wincing and reaching up a hand to adjust the volume in their ears, and Xander looked up in consternation. "Holy crap," he said, tossing the remains of his sandwich aside and tearing off a piece of paper towel from a nearby roll to wipe traces of mayo off his hands. "Somebody better get down there. I heard that our writer guest of honor kind of dropped in unannounced while Dave was waiting for me at the airport, and now we seem to have a situation again. Rory Grissom just walked in the door and got mobbed. That wasn't supposed to happen. Where's Andy May? Crap, never mind, I'll go rescue him." "Send him up here. We can hide him until they get him into his room safely," Libby said. "Too late to stash him. They know he's here. Oh, damn it. I've got a heap of work still to do, and I have to go and babysit the drama queen." He vanished into the corridor. 2 more pros turned up to fill the space he had vacated, asking for their envelopes. One was found easily, the other appeared to be missing altogether, throwing Libby into a state of near panic, until the pro in question thought to mention that since his new book was coming up under a new pseudonym, that might be the name the registration envelope might be under, in a quite different part of the alphabet. "Take it easy," Libby whispered to herself, looking up for a moment and seeing a green room thronged with visiting pro and CONCOM members and convention volunteers, a swirling melee of smiling people full of energy and enthusiasm, waiting with a delighted anticipation for the real festivities to begin on the morrow, but in the meantime running into friends they hadn't seen for months, or maybe a whole year since the last con, chattering, exchanging news, asking about other friends who had not yet made an appearance. "It's just the usual chaos, and it'll get more chaotic as the evening wears on." "Libby, was it Alice who was in charge of the writer's workshop this year?" somebody shouted into her ear, to be heard above a general noise level. "No, she handed over to Lou Martin. I don't think she could make the con this year," Libby shouted in response. "Seen Lou? I need to sort out something. I don't think she's here yet." "Oh, okay, I better email her. Hope she checks her email before she gets here tomorrow. One of her pros..." But someone else was pouring in the envelopes, and Libby turned back to try and keep some control over the process. Out of the corner of her eye, she glimpsed something that was sufficiently out of kilter with the rest of the scene for her to actually take notice. Amongst the heaving, happy throng crowding the green room, there was one person standing alone, with as much space between herself and everybody else as that was possible to achieve under the circumstances. A woman standing very still with both hands loosely by her side. She was dressed in something that may or may not have been a costume, not outlandish enough to be tagged as one immediately, just not commonplace enough to be immediately dismissed as not being one. There was something strange about her, the stillness, the ever so slightly off shade of her silvery skin, something about her eyes. But there was no time for further inspection. Someone else slipped in between Libby and the woman, and when Libby could look that way again, she was gone. Libby could not even be certain anymore what had attracted her attention, but the strange woman's after-image remained in the back of Libby's head like a ghost, distracting her from something that she knew she had been about to do before she was distracted by something else before that. She saw Xander slip back into the suite and burrowed her way across to him, where he had gone back to the computers to set up in the back room. "Your movie star sorted?" I thought he'd be upset, but he was a pig in clover, surrounded by pink-haired chicks with fairy wings who were clamoring for his autograph, and some really weird dude, painted kind of silver or something, who just stood there and watched. Creepy, really. "I don't know. I ought to go Simmons security a shout about him." "What, you think we have a stalker or something on hand?" Libby yelped. "He's a mother-loving movie star. Doesn't it come with the territory?" Xander said. "But maybe he was just a dude who was trying to pretend to be an android and fit in with the theme of the show. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it." Libby's mind went fleetingly to the woman she had seen standing so very still in the melee of the green room, and come to think of it, she too looked like she was playing an android character, But then robots were this year's theme after all, and everyone was just tired and jumpy, that was all. There are a number of droids out there, Libby said slowly, and I distinctly remember seeing a baby blue Dalek near the hospitality suite earlier area. Actually, to be honest, I'm more astonished that there was at least one dude dressed in a replica of the uniform Rory Grissom graced on the good ship Invictus, Sanders said, dismissing the matter. I don't know how the groupies even found him that fast. They must have been waiting in the front door for as long as it took him to manifest. He seems to be enjoying it all rather too much. I almost had to drag him bodily away from there before he spent all his con capital in one spectacular meet and greet. We have plans for him and opening ceremonies after all, and that's in just a few hours. Where's the Steel Magnolia when we need her? The Steel Magnolia, which was what Andy May was known as behind her back, half in affection and half in abject terror, was chewing on her perfect lower lip while cradling a cell phone between her shoulder and her ear in a quiet spot that she had found just inside a newly cleared hotel bedroom, due to be used as a programming room the next day. But Alco's phone kept on going to voicemail, and she had left 3 messages already. She had started out by being snarky, but by the 3rd message she had graduated to, "Please call me, where are you? I'm getting worried." The 4th call was not giving her any more joy, and she finally thumbed off the phone with a frustrated grimace and without leaving another message. A passing thought about starting to call the local hospitals meandered across the surface of her mind, but then she mentally shook herself and firmly admonished her more paranoid self to stop being ridiculous and to possibly start thinking of something adequate to say when Al did turn up with those posters, which were turning into quite the production. Turning sharp right as she exited the sanctuary of the not-yet panel room, she nearly collided with a figure standing close to the wall, very still, his skin a silvery white, with 2 pale eyes set dully into an almost expressionless face. "Sorry," she said automatically, ducking around the guy. He did not respond by word or gesture, and Annie Mae briefly felt as though she should be offended and flounce off in a huff, but she had other things on her mind, and she methodically subtracted the Silverman from her thoughts as she hurried towards and plunged into the far busier corridors where the con was beginning to swing into a higher gear. She failed to notice a pair of congoers who had paused as she flung herself unseeingly past them, but the older of the two, a middle-aged man with receding hairline of salt and pepper hair that swept around the back of his head like a half-tonsure, and a lush grey beard, halted as he turned to follow Andy May's progress with glittering grey-blue eyes. "There she blows," he muttered. His companion, a lanky youngster in perhaps his late teens, turned his head marginally. "She didn't even look," the young man said, a voice dithering between obligatorily aggrieved on his mentor's behalf and vaguely puzzled. "Oh, she wouldn't pay attention to the likes of me, Marius. Not in public." Sam Dutton, Andy May's predecessor at the con chair, said, "I only owned this con for the last 3 decades, that's all. But it's her baby now, and she doesn't want to be reminded of history, not today. And I'm history. I'm not surprised that she wouldn't stop and chat. But still, she looks rather more singularly focused than one should be at this stage of the game. I wonder if everything's okay." "Do you miss it?" Marius Tarkovsky asked, turning back to Sam with a small smile. Sam waved his hands in a gesture that implied a complete inability to answer the question. "Some part of me does," he admitted. "I just know I should be in the thick of things, and it feels odd, like a mental itch, being here and not being on the inside. But on the other hand, anything that does go wrong won't be my fault this time, damn it. Her show, her game, her responsibility. It's what she wanted, and I hope that she gets exactly what she wanted." He stopped and looked almost astonished. "That came out rather more close out than I intended," he said. "Who knew? Maybe it does rankle just a bit more than I thought it would." "You sure it was a good idea coming this year?" Marius asked. "Well, your mom is happier knowing that you've got me in standby. Your first solo con and all that," Sam said, grinning. "So there's the babysitting aspect of it." Marius aimed a polite but still affronted fist bump at the older man's shoulder. "I'm 17, he said. "Exactly," Sam agreed laconically, and he followed the passage of a trio of scantily clad female fairies wearing the barest minimum of chiffon and oversized pink wings. One of them became aware of the scrutiny and half-turned, offering a flirtatious glance from underneath drooping eyelids that looked too weak to support the weight of glitter piled upon them. Marius flushed a bright scarlet right up to the tips of his ears, the reaction to both Sam's implications and that particular response, and looked down to the toes of his sneakers. Sam laughed, but not unkindly. He gave Marius' shoulder an understanding squeeze, and at the same time used the gesture to propel him forward once again in their original direction. "Come on, kid," he said. "We'll mingle a bit more. I'm sure there are friends out there somewhere, and then we can turn in. Tomorrow the fun begins. AndyCon starts in earnest." "Sam?" Sam's head turned very slowly at the sound of his name to face a young man a good 30 years his junior, but with signs of exactly the same receding hairline beginning to make an appearance. They looked remarkably similar, in fact. That hair and the eyes of almost exactly the same color, of almost identical height and build, allowing for some middle-aged spread on Sam. Marius, who immediately recognized the new arrival as Andy Maid's ex-lieutenant, like Liam Connors, wondered not for the first time there was actual truth in tales of time travel, and whether it was possible that somehow, even without knowing it, Liam was a young Sam and there was a dangerous timeline crossing occurring here, which meant that the entire con would implode in a temporal black hole any minute. But nothing of the sort happened, and Sam smiled a tight little smile as he acknowledged Liam with a small nod. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself," Liam said, awkward, not knowing whether to smile or how broadly to smile, or whether he really should have said anything at all. He was, after all, at Andy May's side when the two young Turks had orchestrated the coup that had removed Sam from the con chair. But then Andy May had ditched Liam also to go solo, and now he was stuck in limbo in no man's land, betrayer of the old guard and betrayed by the new. "I didn't think you'd come." "This? I wouldn't miss it for the world. And there's also the fact that I haven't actually missed one of these for 3 decades, and I wasn't about to start now. Habit, you know. How about you?" "Me?" "Well," Sam said, one eyebrow rising Spock-like into the middle of his forehead, "you are kind of compromised with the leadership, aren't you?" Liam flushed. "I don't think," he began, but Sam waved him into silence. "Son," he said, "I rather knew that. You don't think. That was the problem last year. You might have known she wouldn't share, but she's Andy May, and we all know how persuasive she is. I just wanted to know if that was you behind the big name writer, guest one and no show. Did you sabotage that? To get back at Andy May for ditching you? I figured it might be." "Why?" Liam asked defensively. "Because he was my original contact, and I passed his contact details to you, and you were the one dealing with him for this gig until it all went pear-shaped for Andy May after she ditched you. Hey, you can't blame a guy for trying to draw the lines if all the dots are lined up." "I wouldn't do that to her," Liam said, stuffing both hands into the pockets of his jeans. "No, of course not," Sam said, without rancor. "And Vince Silverman is a pleasant enough replacement. I'm quite looking forward to me cornering him for a chat, actually. There are things I wanted to ask him about his books, so it works out nicely." "I thought you wouldn't come," Liam said. After... "I accept your apology," Sam said regally, all but offering up his royal hand to be kissed. Whether or not an apology was actually what Liam had had in mind, he didn't say anything more, and after another short and awkward silence, during which Liam could not or would not lift his eyes to meet Sam's steady gaze, Marius took it upon himself to try and defuse the situation, latching onto the very person they had just named, who had turned into their corridor as though summoned by a spell cast by those syllables. "Isn't that him?" Marius said, nudging Sam with an elbow. "Prince Silverman?" "I believe so," Sam said. "Well, if you'll excuse me, Liam. Hey, Mr. Silverman! Vince!" They sidestepped to mobile Liam and made their way to where Vince Silverman had halted at the sound of his name and turned to see who had hailed him. "We met a number of times at this con or that," Sam said. "Of course, you probably don't remember me at all, but there was that dinner we had, you and me and Larry Neiman and Greg Bear at the NatCon in Seattle a bunch of years back. Black hole pudding, if you recall." Vince Silverman did, vaguely, but he was damned if he could call up a name. He stuck out a hand anyway with a smile that came out commendably sincere, given that he was so completely staged. "Yes, of course," he said. "The name escapes me, I'm afraid, but I do remember that conversation. Dutton, Sam Dutton. We actually emailed some over the years. I used to be con chair of this very con right here until a year ago, but now it is under completely new management, and I'm just a humble fan again. But I'm very glad to see you again, as the guest of honor. They must have had you scheduled down to the minute, but, well, how long are you staying? If you find yourself in the market for a dinner company, perhaps on Sunday night after most of the real festivities are over, perhaps we might connect." "That sounds good," Vince said, and actually meant it. Truth was, he did recall a raucous dinner at a con long past, at which he had had an uncommonly good time, and this man had definitely been there for that. By Sunday it was entirely possible he would be happy to have this dinner companion. 6:30-ish, outside the restaurant, Sam said. "That should be okay as far as any programming is concerned. And I'll probably have this young'un in tow. May I introduce Marius Darkovsky, winner of his high school writing competition for 3 years running, and very much wanting to walk in your shoes one day." "I'm sure it'll be fine," Vince said. "I'll look forward to it. Nice to meet you, Marius. We'll talk." "Enjoy the con," Sam said. Marius, who had been rendered quite speechless by the entire encounter, finally found his voice as he watched Vince Silverman's back vanish into the throng in the corridor. "Do you actually know everyone?" he demanded of Sam as they stood there and allowed the crowds to flow around them like water around an obstacle in its path. "Oh, it's quite a little club," Sam said. Put in enough years and enough cons, and sooner or later you'll at least recognize most people. I remember one time I was at a smaller regional con, and then I more or less went straight from that to that year's Worldcon in LA that year, and the first person I saw in the football field-sized lobby of that enormous hotel was the person to whom I'd said goodbye less than a week ago at another hotel halfway across the country. Sometimes cons feel like they warp the space-time continuum, a space-time anomaly. Don't say that. You all know what always happens to the Enterprise after they go poking too closely at once, Sam said. But that's a bar conversation. We should go and hang out there. Sooner or later, this whole convention comes drifting by and finds you. So I've heard, Marius said dryly. You've said it many times, and yet may I remind you that again, technically I should probably be arrested. Sam grimaced. It's your own fault, boy. You talk and act like you aren't a juvenile, he said. In theory, the next best thing would be the green room, because everyone filters through that sooner or later, and there are no issues with you being underage. But there the problem might be me. Andy May might well have posted "Thou shalt not pass" spells on the door, and fire-breathing dragons will be released in the defense of the realm if I came within 100 feet of the sacred door. But there's bound to be an early party or two going on. Maybe some of them won't even think it necessary to card you, young, and we can pick up all kinds of loose talk if we keep our ears open. Sam, what are you doing here? Marius asked, giving his friend and mentor a long, measured gaze. One of the other guys in the teen writers competition, he's been volunteering this year. He's pretty tight with the new bunch. He says Andy May said that you were going to try and throw a monkey wrench into... No, Sam said, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. I'm interested in how this whole thing plays out this year with the new management crew calling the shots. And I've heard that it's pretty much a given that if I did something one way, Andy May has done her utmost to do it as differently as she can. I would not shoot this con of all cons in the foot. I spent too much time and energy and blood and sweat and tears building up the equity here to tear her down out of some petty spite. No, I'm not going to pull the rug out from under her. But I do want to know just exactly what kind of rug it is that we're standing on. Come on, keep your eyes open. This will give you 6 good novels worth of material if you take copious notes. After that last abortive attempt at connecting with Al on the phone, Andy May had gone so far as to complain about his continued absence to several of her CONCOM members, and had even indicated that she was thinking of sending out the cavalry to look for him, or at least phoning the local lockups and hospitals to find out if he had done something that had landed him in either. She had been dissuaded excuse me, for the moment, and then something else claimed her immediate attention and erased the mystery from the top of her to-do list, with just a mental footnote to take her time and exquisite pleasure in a properly crafted and blistering takedown of a welcome when Al did turn up. But if she had in fact phoned the local ER, she might have found out more than she realized. It was there that a dazed Al Cole began to realize just how much time had passed, that he had not called to provide a reason for his non-arrival at the hotel with the posters everyone was waiting for, that he could not do so anyway since his phone seemed to be missing, and upon further reflection he could not remember what had happened to said posters either, and that he had actually had an arm in a sling which indicated that something bad had happened, of which he didn't quite have a full and complete recollection. I need to, he began urgently, when a young nurse wearing scrubs with a teddy bear pattern on them walked into the room where he sat in a gurney, but she waved him back down when he tried to get on his feet. Those feet were bare, he noticed, with a disconcerted idea that his shoes, as well as his phone and the posters, were also missing from the scene. The nurse pushed him back down on the gurney, gently but firmly. The doctor will be in to see you, she said. You should be all right to go home with a few painkillers. Do you have anyone we can call? No, Al said stupidly, his mind curiously blank, and that was true enough. His home was currently quite empty of anyone whom his condition and whereabouts might be of interest. The reason, of course, was that his flatmate was already at the con, so was Andy May, so was pretty much everyone else he knew. It only occurred to him belatedly after the nurse had left that he should have called them at the con. His head ached. When the doctor did turn up some 30 or so minutes later, Al told him as much. The doctor pulled back his lower eyelids and peered into his eyes with a small flashlight. You don't have concussion, he said, but you're pretty out of it anyway. I should go home, Al said. Where's my clothes? Where's my car keys? The doctor looked at him oddly. Your car's pretty smashed, he said. They towed that. Besides, I wouldn't be happy with you driving anywhere right now. I'd actually prefer it if you stayed. I have to get home, Al said, and then blinked. Towed? Yes, the other guy was pretty total, too. You smashed together pretty good. You're both lucky it all ended up with just a few non-life-threatening broken bones. Wait, towed? Towed where? Were the posters still in there? The posters? The doctor said, looking at Al strangely, obviously reconsidering his options with his patient. I was on my way to... Which company? How do I get hold of... The doctor consulted a chart and then looked up again. Mr. Coe, he said, wherever it was that you were going, you aren't exactly in any shape to go there right now. I'm quite serious about... But Al was seeing Andy May's furious face, burning blue eyes. But I promised I would get the posters there tonight, he murmured. Well, the doctor said, you won't. The number of the towing company is probably on the card you had in your wallet. You can deal with them in good time. Right now, it's my job to make sure you're comfortable and you won't come to any additional harm. Now, is there anyone we can call to pick you up and keep an eye on you? The California resort, Al said. What? The California resort, that's where I need to go. Are you staying there? You aren't local? The doctor consulted his chart again. I thought I saw an address. Everybody's over there, nobody home right now. Oh, the doctor said uncomprehendingly, staring at Al with a slight frown. You want someone to keep an eye on me? Al said quite lucidly. Well, all my friends are there right now, at the convention, where I was supposed to be, with the posters. What time is it? The doctor consulted his watch. Almost 7:30. Call me a cab, Al said. I'll go there and I'll... To a convention? The doctor looked skeptically at the arm cradled in a sling and a collection of small cuts and darkening bruises elsewhere on the patient's body. I really think you're in no shape to... Just do it, Al said, and please find me my stuff. The doctor's brows drew together at a distinctly less than deferential tone, and then he shrugged. As you wish. You're leaving on your own recognizance, though, and against medical advice, and I'll put that on the record. I'll send someone to help you dress. Your clothes are over there on the table, in the bag. Some of them are a little messed up, but I guess we can't help that. I'll send a small bottle of Vicodin home with you. And it would really be good if you could look in on a doctor at some point during the next 48 hours or so, just to make sure. Fine, Al muttered. All of him hurt, as though he had been worked over by a professional boxer. His chest felt vaguely caved in, and he seemed to be having difficulty with the simple act of inhaling a lungful of air, but nothing major seemed to be broken other than the damaged arm, and he could cope with the rest of it. Because movement was limited with one arm in a sling, and because every small movement made him wince, it took some little while before he could, with assistance, struggle halfway into a set of clothes which were not happy with the sling situation. Another 40 minutes or more passed before he walked, staggering a little, to a waiting cab and gave the directions to the California resort. It was now past 8 o'clock and full dark, and it was later still by the time the cab pulled up and woke its passenger, dozing fitfully in the back seat. Al blinked several times and sat up, wincing as he jarred the strapped arm. "We're here?" "Yes, sir. We're at 2235 Bluff Road," the cab driver said. "That'll be $22.50. Al awkwardly pulled out a wallet with his good hand and ferreted out a 20 and a 10, passing them over to the cabbie and over the back of the driver's seat. "Keep the change." "Thank you," the cabbie said. "I'll just get the door for you." It took something like an elegant scramble, minding his injured arm and shoulder, for Al to extricate himself out of the back seat of the cab, and while he was still sorting himself out at the curbside, the cabbie gave him a half wave and pulled away. But it took a few more moments for Al to realize a few uncomfortable truths about the situation. He should have been deposited at the front door of a hotel. He had not been. He had in fact been delivered to what seemed to be the side of a dark and otherwise empty road. The place where the California resort should have been, where it in fact had been less than 12 hours before this moment, was just a lacuna in the night. The hotel, the entire hotel, had simply disappeared. I was going to do a bit more, but I'm losing my voice, so I'll do a bit more later. And in the meantime, like I said, if you want an ebook copy of it, if you want an ebook copy of the book, let me know in messages and emails and any way you know how. The first 10 people who do so and say, "I want it," get a free copy of the ebook. And I will be talking to you again soon with the second installment of Abducticon. Well, let me do this properly. With a second installment of Abducticon. I'll see you later. Bye.